This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey, Atari 2600, and Commodore 64, all the way up to Generation 7 with the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii. Today on this episode, we'll be talking about the resurgence that is the Commodore 64. Before we get into what's cooking with the Commodore 64 currently, we have to go through some of the history and what impact it had on the video game industry, as well as when the Commodore 64 was discontinued. We'll talk about some of the best games too as well, its lasting impact after its closure, and what is going on right now with the brand. All right, let's get started. Retro XP is now part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, joining the likes of Raw Dogs, Zombie Dogs, Elden Dogs, and of course the flagship Hair of the Dogcast podcasts. You'll most likely find me in a few of those episodes, most notably Zombie Dogs, where all we talk about is the Resident Evil series. The network has tons of bonus content and episodes on Patreon at patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast. So help support us by donating and not only getting access to those early access and Patreon exclusive episodes, but also access to the Discord community exclusive to Patreon members with a minimum of $3 a month. There's a room exclusive to Retro XP in there where we talk about retro video games and episode discussions. I'll also note too that I posted a video on my recent trip to Retrofest, Arkansas that is exclusive for Patreon members for the first month or so. Normally you'll get it probably later on in the normal feed on YouTube, but it's exclusive to Patreon members right now. I want to say it clocks in about 30 to 40 minutes video of me talking about kind of my experiences there and, what I picked up and everything. So otherwise you can follow me on X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroX Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening to this on, be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. Episodes are also live on YouTube, and follow me there as well at RetroX Podcast. The Commodore 64, which also is known as the C64, if you don't want to waste your time speaking, is an 8-bit home computer that was introduced in January 1982 by Commodore International, first shown at the Consumer Electronics Show in January 1982 in Las Vegas. Interestingly enough, it was also listed in the Guinness World Records as the best-selling desktop computer model of all time, with independent estimates placing the number sold between 12.5 and 17 million units. That is not a small number in those days. Volume production started in early 1982, marketing it in August for US dollars 595, equivalent to what we now know as $1,940. Now, keep in mind, this is a computer. This is a home computer that just happens to play video games. So if you're thinking of that number as like that's what a video game system is, keep in mind the Commodore was also a home computer. It was a home desktop, so to speak, that you could just plug right into your TV. It was preceded by the VIC-20 and Commodore PET. The C64 took its name from its 64 kilobytes, big hardware. Average, or the accurate number is 65,536. So 64 kilobytes of RAM. With support for multicolor sprites and a custom chip for waveform generation, the 64 could create superior visuals and audio compared to systems without such custom hardware. Also, one of the big boons that this system also brought to is that it was a music synthesizer, so you can actually make music on the Commodore 64, which was pretty cool. The C64 dominated. Try saying C64 three times fast. I'm not even going to try. The C64 dominated the low-end computer market in the United States for most of the later years in the 1980s. So between 1983 and 1986, roughly, the C64 had about 30 and 40% of the share of the U.S. market. And on average, between that time, it was selling about 2 million units sold. which at the time was outselling IBM PC compatibles, the Apple II, and the Atari 8-bit computers, which was pretty crazy at the time. Small little company coming out of Europe. Sam Tramiel, a later Atari president and the son of Commodore's founder, said in a 1989 interview, "When I was at Commodore, we were building 400,000 C64s a month for a couple years." In the UK market, the C64 faced competition from the BBC Micro, the ZX Spectrum, and later the Amstrad CPC 464. Who names these systems? But the C64 was still the second most popular computer in the UK, of course, after the ZX Spectrum. The Commodore 64 failed to make any impact in Japan, unfortunately, but their market was dominated by Japanese computers, such as the NEC PC 8801, the Sharp X1, and Fujitsu FM7, and the MSX. In France, it was a different story too, where the ZX Spectrum dominated along with the Thomson MO5 and TO7 and the Amstrad CPC 464. Interestingly enough, Sam Tramiel, who was the son of Jack Tramiel, Jack Tramiel founded Commodore International, and he had humble beginnings. And initially, the story is that when he was trying to get funding for creating the Commodore International brand, he sought the German government to kind of give him a little bit of a loan. And the German government was like, "Why should we give you a loan? Why should we give you money for this?" And Jack was a Holocaust survivor. He was in Auschwitz at the time. And obviously, thankfully, he was able to escape and be freed. So he said in a quote that, "I think you owe it to me," which is hard as balls, man. It's hard as balls to basically tell the German government, like, hey, he was a Polish Jewish person. And he's like, you owe it to me. Like, imagine how good a publicity it's going to be when the Commodore 64 or when the Commodore International brand becomes this big thing. So Germany was like, all right, make a fair point. So pretty cool opening story. All right. So I know you nerds out there are interested in this stuff, so I got to talk about it. These are words and numbers that I have no idea what it means. I kind of get some of it. I know, obviously, this is 35, 40-year-old hardware. So the microprocessor CPU is a MOS Technology 6510, and it's a modified 6502 with an integrated 6-bit I/O port. It clocks at just under 1 megahertz, so 0.985 or 1.023 megahertz in the North American market. The previous number was PAL. The video was a MOS Technology VIC 26567, and it basically outputs at 16 colors. The text mode, you get about like 40 by 25 characters, 256 user-defined characters, so multiple different languages, I imagine. Extended background color, 4-bit color RAM defines foreground color, so it's not too poppy. Like it, when you see this on a CRT TV, it looks kind of like the colors kind of blend together. So keep in mind, CRT TVs had that, they're just not like what we know as TVs now. Bitmap modes, 320 by 200 display resolution, 2 unique colors in each 8x8 pixel block, which is, I guess, 8 hardware sprites of 24 by 21 pixels, and it has smooth scrolling. The sound has a 3-channel synthesizer with programmable 80 SR envelope with 8 octaves and 4 waveforms per audio channel. So you got multiple different kinds of sounds that this thing outputs. As far as input and output, you got 2 6526 complex interface adapters. Am I making you cross-eyed yet? 16-bit parallel I/O, 8-bit serial I/O, and then, of course, this also has a 24-hour time-of-day clock with a programmable alarm clock. How does that work? A programmable alarm clock? So it just, I guess it must output with sound. Huh, interesting. As far as the RAM goes, it's got 64 kilobytes, which I talked about before. 38 of those kilobytes were available for basic programs. The rest of it was dedicated to the games themselves. Creative Micro Designs also produced a 2 MB REU for the C64 and the C128, which was the C128 was the disk drive itself that played the games. and they called it the 1750 XL. And this technology actually supported up to 16 megabytes, but 2 megabytes was the biggest one officially made, of course. As far as the ROM goes, basically the games themselves were roughly around 20 kilobytes, 9 kilobytes, which was Commodore Basic 2.0. 7 kilobytes were, kernel. I don't know what that means. 4 kilobytes were character generator, providing 2 kilobyte character sets. I'm getting this straight off of Commodore's Wikipedia page, so I'm just reading these off. I'm sorry. The cartridges themselves were kind of similar in size to like the old Atari cartridges. So I don't know what, about like 3 inches wide by maybe like 4 inches tall or something like that. So, yeah, that was something. Let's just say if you're listening to this, it's not as powerful as 8-bit. You get an idea, you get a sense of what 8-bit is. And I would say probably confidently that the majority of you out there listening right now have had or owned or own a Nintendo Entertainment System, which that is an 8-bit system. And you can kind of get an idea in terms of like what the Commodore 64 was outputting. Now, when you think of Nintendo 64, that was 64-bit. And obviously with this one, this is 64 kilobytes. So it's much different than the Nintendo 64. So this isn't saying that the Commodore 64 and the Nintendo 64 were similar in tech. That's obviously not the case. So it's weird when you think of the naming conventions. But anyway, at the introduction in 1982, the production cost was about $135. And like I said earlier, the retail price, this was going for $595. So they were reaping in more than double in profits. In 1985, the retail price actually went down to $149. And in those numbers, that's $440. Still a pretty pricey boy. And the production costs at this time were believed to be somewhere between $35 and $50. Commodore would not confirm this cost figure, but as we know in the past, it's a little bit different now, apparently, that throughout a console's life cycle, production gets streamlined, production gets cheaper. So then even just developing and manufacturing the consoles, you're not going to make a lot of money in that first year or that second year. And I mean, in this case, Commodore was making a ton of money in that first year. But, right now we're thinking about like consoles trying to make as much money as possible. And a lot of times they can't. They break even in that first 2 years. Once, they get a handle on the logistics, the manufacturing, the costs of everything, parts associated with it. I mean, as we know, technology is almost like going light speed. So when you make a system now, it's almost outdated 2 years later. Eventually parts get cheaper. So in this case, as we saw between 1982 and 1985, the costs of production went down by $100 at that time, which is no slouch. I mean, so the seeing a drop in price in 3 years by God, yeah, you would say $400. That's crazy. During the life cycle of the system, I think 1994, I think was when the consoles ceased production. During the life cycle of the system, there were 1,121 games. However, the total amount of games leading up to currently now, there's still an active homebrew community that's making Commodore 64 games, spans far beyond that number. And I was trying to Google like what the total number of games is, and it's kind of hard to find because you got ROMs out there that you could download. You have actual cartridge-based homebrew games that people made too as well. This number can round out to about 10,000, and like I said, it's debatable. Some sites I've looked at, people have commented to say it's more like 15,000, more like 20,000 or so. And like I said earlier, there was people made homebrew games that were just downloadable only, and that you can upload to a Commodore 64 emulator system. I want to say, not in full confidence, but there was a few years ago, I think in 2016, 2017, I think someone made a plug-in, kind of like a Raspberry Pi motherboard type plug-in where it was like a Commodore 64 Mini, so to speak, and it had games uploaded on there, and you can actually, code your own games onto the computer, upload them, and play them with the Commodore 64 emulator engine. So, yeah, interesting that the community still to this day is like making Commodore 64 games. It's wild. So, according to Retro Dodo website, the top games for the Commodore 64, one of the top ones is Impossible Mission. This is in no way related to Mission Impossible, but I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of crossover. The Impossible Mission is kind of like a side-scrolling action puzzle-solving game. You have 6 hours to collect 36 pieces of a puzzle, and you're shooting enemies, and you're trying to solve passwords. You're trying to solve puzzles. You're shooting robots, all of this stuff. So that's probably one of the most famous games that the Commodore 64 is very well known for. So then you got Target Renegade, or actually Impossible Mission came out in 1984. Target Renegade, which came out on other systems too. I think I have it for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Target Renegade came out in 1988. This was basically like a side-scrolling, beat 'em up, kind of like in the vein of like Double Dragon or something like that. So it has an isometric 3D view. So it's interesting that it kind of looks 3D a little bit, especially when you move up and down the playing field. Sword of Far Goal, which came out in 1982. Basically, gameplay mostly revolves around exploring yellow brick dungeons, kind of like in a top-down fashion. So you're moving your character around, and the objective is you have to try to locate the legendary Sword of Far Goal. So, basically, the battles are controlled by the computer, which is interesting. So you're just moving around trying to find the sword, and trying to navigate through the dungeons, and the computer is basically doing the battles for you. So this requires, the RPG elements of upgrading. So Maniac Mansion, I've talked about that before. This is a Lucasfilm game where, you're trying to find your kidnapped girlfriend in this house that's got some bizarre things happening in there. A mad scientist in this mansion has fallen afoul of a sentient meteor, which has enslaved his mind. And the meteor is kind of like an alien life form. So, you and your friends go into Maniac Mansion, and you have to kind of smartly move your characters around so that you don't get caught. And it's a point and click movement. You can talk, you can open doors. It's a pretty cool game. I have it for the Nintendo, and there's multiple different endings depending on how fast you play, how thorough you are with everything. So it's kind of cool. This one came out in 1987. Then you got Shadow of the Beast. So this was a port, I guess from maybe, I don't know where it was a port from, but it says it's a port. Basically it's like a side-scrolling, and one plane, an action beat 'em up. You're just fighting monsters and demons in the sky and everything like that. Operation Wolf came out in 1988. This was similar to the action kind of shooter that of through other systems, where basically the screen is scrolling basically from right to left. Enemies keep popping up, and you have to move your cursor around and shoot them. So you're shooting enemy soldiers, you're shooting boats, you're shooting helicopters, you're shooting all these things. So next up was Double Dragon, came out in 1988 in the same year. It looks like this is, like I talked about Double Dragon earlier, side scrolling, moving up and down a plane, and you're trying to basically, find Billy's girlfriend. So Billy and Jimmy, they're brothers. So Bubble Bobble, number 8, came in 1987. This is a kind of like a cool, you're playing as tiny little baby dragons, and or actually dinosaurs, I should say, Bub and Bob. And you're basically trying to save your girlfriends. And so basically you have to clear the bad guys. You have to use bubbles within that are bouncing around the levels to kind of give you special power-ups. In this game, there are over 100 levels total. Holy cow. Crazy. Next, number 9 is Bruce Lee. Came out in 1984. This is not what you expect. This is like kind of like I want to say by looking at the picture, it kind of looks like a almost. I mean, you're platforming. It's like the first Super Mario Brothers games where you're kind of platforming on rooftops and stuff, and you're attacking enemies. So typical side-scrolling action platformer. Then number 10, The Great Guiana Sisters, 1987, and this looks like this looks like a blatant ripoff of Super Mario Brothers, and yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the pictures of this right now, and I'm just like, my God, is this a blatant ripoff? The similarities, I guess, are so obvious that the developers actually were sued by Nintendo. Of course, Nintendo just doesn't like anybody making games like them. So, um, so yeah, apparently they spelled Guyana. Guyana is not really spelled like the cover art. I guess the most interesting thing about this is the cover art says Guyana with one A, but in the game, she's pronounced with two N's. That's interesting. So I don't know. I find things like that interesting. I guess maybe you don't, but yeah. So I mean, there's tons of other different games. There's like International Karate, which is kind of a cool like kung fu game, Spy versus Spy. They had a Ghostbusters game that's kind of it's not that it looks bad. Turrican, pretty cool game. It's a really good. There were so many good RPGs here too. Like Wasteland is another good one. A lot of like text-based RPGs, kind of similar in the vein of like Shadowgate. And yeah, so it's God. There's so many different kinds of games on here. It's just a shame that for especially at the time, like $595 was a pretty steep price for a lot of people. So, as far as reception goes, in July 1983, Byte magazine stated that the 64 retails for $595. At that price, it promises to be one of the hottest contenders in the under $1,000 personal computer market. It is described as also by another magazine, SID, as a true music synthesizer. The quality of the sound has to be heard to be believed. So a lot of people were getting into, music at the time could use this to actually make music tracks, which is pretty cool. While criticizing at the time, on the same vein, they are also criticizing the use of the Commodore Basic 2.0 system, the floppy disk performance, which is even slower than the Atari 810 drive. I don't know what that means. The Commodore's, and the Commodore's quality control. So apparently some of the parts weren't necessarily the best in the best condition. Byte magazine gave more details at the time, saying that the C64 had inadequate Commodore Basic 2.0 language, an 8K byte interpreted BASIC, which they assumed was because, and this is a quote for them, obviously Commodore feels that most home users will be running prepackaged software. There is no provision for using graphics from within a basic program except by means of poke commands. I don't know what that means. Why do I even read this stuff if I don't even know what that means? So I guess at the time, Creative Computing magazine in December 1984 said that the C64 was the overwhelming winner in a category of home computers under $500. And despite that, it still criticized the slow disk drive, only 2 cursor directional keys, 0 manufacturer support, so you couldn't call Commodore for support at the time, I guess, non-standard interfaces, et cetera, et cetera. So small little complaints, I guess. However, at the time, this was the only option at the time if you wanted to buy a home computer that you could plug into your TV for under $500 under $600. Especially with these tech specs, 64 kilobytes, bunch of color palettes, sprite graphics, and tons of available software. They, like I said, within that time frame, 1,000 games doesn't seem like a lot compared to now. I mean, we see almost 1,000 games being developed for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X in a year. I mean, at this time, video games were a dime a dozen, or weren't a dime a dozen. So, of course, at the time, the biggest competition that the Commodore 64 had was the Apple II. And though that was going for well over what the Commodore 64 was asking for. So obviously the Apple II computer at the time had, much more powerful hardware. Obviously it had its own monitors. So you weren't plugging this into your TV or anything like that. So, yeah. So, however, kind of as things moved on through the 80s in the United States, demand for 8-bit computers all but ceased as the 1990s began, and PC compatibles completely dominated the computer market. I want to say when I was 1993, I had my first real home console. Maybe even earlier than that, it was a Packard Bell at the time. So yeah, I mean, at that time, graphics had spiked to well past 8-bit computers. However, the C64 continued to be popular in the UK and other European countries. The machine's eventual demise was not due to the lack of demand or the cost of the C64 itself. Like I said, at that time, it was going for about 150, which at that time for a computer like this, that was cheap. But rather because the cost of producing the actual disk drive that it had. In March of 1994, Cbit in Hanover, Germany, they were the ones that were making this disk drive, announced that the C64 would be finally discontinued in 1995, noting that the floppy disk drive that it had cost more to make than what the C64 actually cost as a whole. I mean, no company's going to be making money off of that. So 1 month after that announcement, of course, 1 month, later, in 1994, after this company, Cbit, made that announcement, company filed for bankruptcy. Well, when Commodore went bankrupt, all production on their inventory, including the C64, was completely discontinued. And that basically ended an 11.5-year production cycle, which was, when you think about it, pretty long for a system at that time. Total sales ranged between 30 million units sold worldwide. However, official records say it was about 12.5 million. So who knows what it is. And even still to this day, with the exception of the Raspberry Pi, little motherboard, the Commodore 64 was still the third most popular computing platform going into the 21st century. So Commodore 64, Apple II, and I honestly forget what else. But yeah, I mean, it had an impact. It had an impact on video gaming. It had an impact on home computing, on music, synthesizing. I mean, it was at the time, it was like an all-in-one kind of computer interface. It's crazy that we had something like that at the time. So basically from 1994 to 2025, 31 years later, the community has been pretty active in supporting the brand itself. Lemon64 is a forum site that's very active, very much active. And, it's basically a lot of forum users coming in and just talking about some of the games. And it's a good place to actually find some homebrew games, some ROM games as well, or at least links to them. And they're rating games, especially some of the newer games coming out. And even like they're helping assist. They're helping each other kind of like develop these games. So it's kind of cool that there's still like a huge market of people out there that, probably had a Commodore 64 growing up and still love the system to this day. So why am I talking about the Commodore 64? Like, why now? I don't have this system. I never had this system. I've never played it before. I've seen it in person. I've been like, wow, that's the Commodore 64. I could definitely pick it out in a lineup, or if I was at a rummage sale and I saw it in the distance, yeah, I'd be able to tell what a Commodore 64 is. However, I read an article. I get Old School Gamer magazine. I get it every month, and I read an article that all of a sudden Commodore 64 has the Commodore brand has been bought. On June 7th, 2025, YouTuber Christian Simpson of the channel Retro Recipes, which has now been renamed to Retro Recipes X Commodore, released a video titled "Can We Save the Commodore brand? My biggest project yet." And in the video, he interestingly enough, Christian Simpson, he got his start on YouTube, and one of his most watched YouTube videos on his channel is when he actually took a Commodore 64, and this was like, I want to say 10, 12 years ago. He took a Commodore 64 and basically rebuilt it. He resoldered it. He put in new capacitors. He kind of like replaced a lot of the old kind of like hardware bits and shields and everything like that, and basically turned it into a brand new thing. So he got to start being kind of like a tech guy, where he would just refurbish, systems and kind of just a lot of trial and error stuff. So, the guy knows his stuff. The guy is a huge Commodore fan. Arguably that's how he got his fame. That's how he got his start. And his channel kind of goes through a lot of different, phases of nostalgia. Like, for example, I think he had a couple videos featuring the Kit car from the TV series Knight Rider, which is kind of cool. So he's he's out there. His content ranges from a lot of different things, and video games being one of them. So at the end of this video, where it was titled "Can We Save the Commodore Brand?" at the end, he hinted at he was planning to acquire the entire holding company, maintaining the original Commodore trademarks and branding. And that company is Commodore Corporation BV. And basically, can you imagine like owning a copyright and then just not doing anything with it? Like it's kind of crazy that. But I mean, when you think about what could you do, unless you have someone that knows the modern video game space, it's probably people that own it that just say, well, I don't know what to do with this, so I'm just going to sit with it. And it's not like they're losing money on it. They just own the name. That's it. So on June 28th, 2025, he made a part 2 of this video, and it was announced that he had reached an agreement and hinted at basically doing an upcoming new hardware release. And Christian went in with quite a few people on, I imagine they had to pool some of their money together and divvy up a lot of the roles that they would be playing in this company. But so yeah, there was another video that he posted recently of them actually signing the deal with a lot of the old Commodore 64 people that were involved in its early development, and a bunch of new people as well. The names of those people like can range anywhere between like, so there's Mark Bilodeau, who's the chief technology officer. Sean Donahue is a co-founder, along with, like I said, Christian Simpson. Jerry Ellsworth, she was a person that designed, when I talked about that mini Commodore 64, she was one of the chief designers of that. So she's a technical advisor and hardware partner. They have a legal counsel, John Errico, Marcel Franquet, the chief quality officer, Bill Hurd, who's a hardware consultant. That's what it says. And then Tom Middletich, who's a chief creative officer. That's interesting. But yeah, so there's a ton of people involved in this project. On July 12th, the newly revived magazine Compute's Gazette, in its first edition, announced the re-release of the original Commodore 64, which coincided with a video announcement from Retro Recipes X Commodore. The Commodore 64 Ultimate is the new system that's going to be gracing our, homes pretty soon. It's an FPGA-based re-implementation of the original 64 hardware, which retains compatibility with existing C64 peripherals and cartridges while offering expanded capabilities and modern connectivity. So this is kind of like similar to those like analog systems that I talked about in a previous episode, where it's not software emulation. It's not computer programs that are trying to emulate what the hardware does. This is actual hardware that natively plays these old cartridges, and doing it well, almost like one-for-one copies of the original hardware. The system itself was created with community partners and their projects, such as Gideon Zweitzer, and a customized variant of the Ultimate 64 Elite 2 main board. So this is a new motherboard that they're making with Chinese manufacturer and PCBWay. The original schedule is called for these units to be shipped either this month, or it's set to be done production in October and November of this year, 2025. Albert Eben, who I talked about early, the owner of the Commodore trademarks, Commodore Corporation BV, Albert Eben was the seller, so he was the main guy that basically owned all these patents. So he was there and present with the signing. There's a whole video that shows the process and actually goes, shows a lot of like clips of the boardroom meeting and everything like that. He was selling, and of course with Christian, who is the main buyer of these trademarks, was there along with some of the original staff from the old brand, like Al Charpentier, David Henier, R.J. Michael, David Pleasance, and Leonard Tramiel, who is the son of Jack Tramiel, the original co-founder of Commodore International. So, like, for example, Al Charpentier, he's a technical advisor and a visionary. So obviously he's bringing a lot of his technical advice, to Christian for the Commodore 64 Ultimate, which is kind of cool. And Leonard Tramiel, who, according to on the website, his title is Chief Tramiel Officer. I don't think I think he's just there almost like in spirit and to just bring that kind of like old school Commodore 64 feel. I don't think he's really doing anything specific or maybe not fully in charge of hardware or software or anything like that. I think he's just kind of like just hanging out basically. And I'm not knocking the guy at all. I'm not, saying anything that his role in the company is diminished, but who better to have on your board? Who better to have, like there with you while you're rebooting, a video game system that's been, dormant for 31 years than, one of the original, owners or one of the original, like, members of the, initial system. So what's under the hood of this Commodore 64 Ultimate? Well, I mean, we don't know that for sure right now because the system's not even out yet. It's not even in the hands of anybody. However, if you go to the Retro Recipes YouTube page, they do go into the factory in China where, this factory is collaborating with PCBWay. They're making the motherboards, and once they make those motherboards, they ship them to the manufacturer where they start installing all the parts, all the chips, all the connectors, everything like that. The PCBWay is actually a pretty interesting website. I hear about it all the time. Macho Nacho Productions is a channel that I follow all the time. He's always sponsored by PCBWay, but it's a good place to actually, if you're if you want to manufacture a motherboard by yourself, or if you're a hobbyist or a pro or a major company, they can set you up. I've never used them, but I've heard them marketed by a lot of people. And it kind of shows them in the video. It's kind of cool because they show them like how they're testing it, how they're solving a lot of the problems. I think there was like a couple problems where they actually solved a major problem with the motherboard itself, with how it displayed text. And it was pretty cool that, this guy, Christian, was there to solve the problem, and kind of gives you a little bit of sense of like, this guy knows what he's doing. And this guy can actually troubleshoot, and this guy can actually solve problems with it, especially, before the hardware even comes out, which is cool because, no one wants, everyone wants to support this brand. And I'll be talking about prices here in a little bit. They don't want to waste their money on something that's not even perfect. So it's pretty cool to see the kind of like behind the scenes and the ins and outs of just the hardware manufacturer itself. I mean, it's not a big factory. It's probably in an office building, and there's probably like 6-7 people maybe working there, but still it's pretty cool to kind of see the behind the scenes look on it. And they're not sharing any specs yet, but obviously this ain't going to be anywhere near PS5 or Xbox or modern gaming PC specs. It's running Commodore 64 games. That's it. What we do know, according to their website, the website is commodore.net. It's compatible with 10,000 plus original retro games for the Commodore 64. It includes all the cartridges. It includes the peripherals and the controllers. And the controllers that they come packaged with this has more RAM and a turbo boost in it. I don't know what turbo boost means, but that's what the website says. The unit itself actually comes preloaded with 50 plus games, which includes a copy of Jupiter Lander sequel, which is brand new. The first new developed game by Commodore 64 in over 30 years, which is really cool. And they have memory on the system itself to add games if you'd like. It's got a color-changing case and keyboard with LEDs that respond to 2 real or 8 replicated onboard SID sound chips. So if you're playing music on it, it actually responds to the music it's playing. The LED lights shift, which is kind of cool. It's got built-in Wi-Fi. You can, game transfer online or with a USB cassette. It's like basically the USB cartridge, so to speak. Bursting with classic and new games. It also touts it being the world's first transparent keyboard circuit board to let the text speak for itself. So when you think of like a transparent, translucent casing of like a controller, the old Game Boys had that too as well, where you could actually see the working parts and everything. You can actually see the working parts of the keyboard itself, which apparently it's the world's first. The system itself is just the keyboard. Like I said, one big keyboard that you plug into your TV. So it's kind of cool. And like I said earlier, if I haven't said it already, it's HDMI compatible. I think it also has a port where you could actually plug it into a CRT TV if you want for that authentic feel. So I would assume it doesn't say. Actually, I'm trying to think if it actually said like it comes with. I'm looking right now. It doesn't really say like what it comes with. I don't think it comes with plugins for the old CRT TVs or anything like that. So, interesting. But I think from what the website says, it has that option. So I could be wrong, of course. So, apparently every motherboard has creator autographs etched into the motherboard, which is kind of cool. It also comes with a spiral-bound manual, glossy classic box, and more, it says. I don't know what more means, but that's what the website says. So there's 3 models you can pre-order on the website right now. So you can go there right now. I'm literally staring at it right now, right in front of me. So, one of them is the Starlight Edition. It's a translucent LED lit keyboard, like I talked about earlier. This goes for about $350. It normally goes for I think $400, but right now it's $50 off. And apparently there's a buy one get the second 10% off sale going right now, which is kind of cool. The Founders Edition, which is the next one up, has a 24 karat. The system just comes. There's nothing really special that comes with it. Everything I talked about, all the features that I talked about earlier, the Wi-Fi, the color changing, stuff like that, that's standard with the Starlight Edition, and all the other editions. It's just the Founders Edition. This is the kind of like the big one, the collector's edition, so to speak. It comes with a 24 karat gold-plated Commodore and Power badges, Golden Galaxy Stardust keys, each with a one-of-a-kind metallic shimmer that catches the light like scattered stars. A translucent amber case, commemorative Commodore Gold Seal Share Certificate, 24 karat gold Commodore badges, dog tag necklace, and a gold-labeled holographic serial number sticker starting at 0000001. And this goes for about $500 as of recording. So, if you want something really cool and really unique, 24 karat gold plated, all this stuff, whatever, if that's your thing, for $150 extra, that's not a bad jump, or you could go for the basic model, which is just a standard grade casing, what you've known. It's more the classic look of the original Commodore 64. No lighted LED keyboard or anything like that. This one goes for just $300, but it's the same thing. It comes with everything that I talked about earlier. So, in terms of shipping dates, which are estimates at best, considering the economy that we live in right now and the way things are going with manufacturing and tariffs and all this stuff, actually on the website, they kind of addressed the tariffs. If your country charges import tariffs, like the USA, you'll see a tariff tax at checkout. This covers everything up front, so there's no more to pay later. We don't control these fees, but we avoid surprises. If tariffs drop after you pay, we'll refund you at shipping. If they rise a lot before shipping, we may adjust, but only if truly needed to protect Commodore's future. That's That's just the world we live in, man. Like it's wild. So you could, depending on what happens when you purchase it, when you pre-order it, and then when you ship it, tariffs could either go up or down, and you could either owe more money or you could, get money back, which is, I wonder how they would refund you money on that. But that's the world we live in now. So if you were to pre-order one now, which there are still plenty of openings for pre-order, there's a ton of different. There's a ton of supply left. You're looking at a February, March 2026 delivery. So not that bad. So if you were to pre-order now, like I said, I'm recording this in October. You could get this within a few months. Pre-orders went live late in July, and those that pre-ordered early from there will be getting theirs between November and January of 2026. So pretty cool, pretty quick turnaround. Like it still boggles me that we first heard about this in July, and all of a sudden we turn around and now we're getting a new system coming up pretty quickly, which leads me to believe that, and this is purely speculation on my part, that Christian's been planning this for a long time, and he's probably done a lot of the hardware stuff kind of in the back end, maybe for years, I would say. Because quick turnarounds from purchasing a company to building a full-on system and hardware, 6 months is a very short time from inception to shipping. I'm not a business guy. I don't know anything about business. I know some stuff about business, I guess, some of the basic stuff, but to me, it just seems like a very quick turnaround. So this leads me to believe that Christian, the guy that bought the company, Commodore, has been planning this for a while, and he's probably done a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And the only thing that he just didn't have at his disposal at the time was literally the Commodore name. Now that he has it, he basically went full speed and just went, right to manufacturing right away. So, pretty cool. Business investment takes a long time. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we just don't know about, that we can't comprehend. So, this guy did it right. Like, we're going to be getting a new Commodore 64 system within a couple months. Atari did something similar to this. They didn't. Of course, the Atari name has been, with the same people for a while, so it's not like they were like sitting dormant for 30 years. They did something similar with the 7800 Plus, which is a new system that plays all the old tech and plugs into your HD TV with built-in HDMI. And now we're getting the Commodore 64 in the same vein. This is just, what a time to be alive, guys. Like, what a time to be alive where we're seeing old become new again. Like, we're getting old systems that people still play. You can't just go in and buy a Commodore 64. You can't just go in and buy an Atari 7800. You can't. So, but people still want to play these games. They still want to experience these things. And if these companies are still around, these are your opportunities to still make the hardware. And granted, you're making it much cheaper. You're making it much smaller even. And making it in more quantities, and granted, Commodore is not going to be selling millions and millions of copies. They're not going to be anywhere near the numbers that they had in the 80s. It's just a fact. And with the, video game systems the way they are now, PlayStation 5, PCs, everything, Commodore 64 is like garbage graphics compared to what we have now. And when I say garbage graphics, I don't mean like they're bad graphics. It's just dated. It's antiquated, and I'm saying it again. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's just, with the younger generation getting into video games now, they're going to look at Commodore 64 graphics, and they're going to look at a game like Ghosts of Yotai or Doom the Dark Ages and be like, well, I want this stuff. This one looks cooler than these, bland Commodore graphics. And this is not their fault. But, us old guys and us old girls, hey, what is old has become new again, and we can re-experience all these games again, which is great. I never had a Commodore 64 growing up, and I was too young when it first came out, obviously, at the time. My first system was a Nintendo Entertainment System. I believe I said that before, but I never knew anyone at the time growing up who owned a Commodore 64. I had no concept of its existence when I was younger. I knew a handful of kids in my neighborhood who had an NAS, had an Atari, and even a small few who had a Sega Master System, although it was very, very few. I think I can count them on one hand. Commodore 64 seemed to me like a high-class system to own for, and I say this in the nicest way, computer nerds. I use that term lightly, not in a negative way at all, because one could argue that from a home computer like an Apple II, the Commodore 64 was the first home console that made homebrew video game development accessible, user-friendly, everything that, you didn't need to spend thousands of dollars on a home computer console that plays games and also can like make games maybe. I mean, when I say user friendly, I don't mean everybody can just make games on the Commodore 64. I mean, you got to be pretty smart to be making video games. But nonetheless, the community still sings the Commodore 64's praises. Like I talked about earlier, there's a whole forum website just visited daily by hundreds, if not thousands, of people talking about the games, talking about the new stuff, getting in conversations with making new games. Even like I said, and it looks like according to the Commodore 64 Ultimate website, these pre-orders are selling. Like there's over 10,000 pre-ordered worldwide right now, which it's rough numbers. I'm just looking at the stock that they allocated and kind of like what available pre-orders are right now. So like say for example, the Commodore 64 Ultimate Edition, they're only making 6,400 of these things, and that's a very specific number. There's 3,430 left on the launch pad. So, we got almost 3,000 that have been sold of the Founders Edition. And I don't think there's a limit on any of the other ones like the Starlight Edition or the Basic Edition, but it's still pretty cool. And while I'm not a Commodore 64 fan, and I'm probably the last person on the planet to be showcasing the new Commodore 64 Ultimate, I'm not, like I said, I've never played a Commodore 64. I've seen it being played, and I've been like, okay, that's cool. I'm happy for you guys. I really am. I don't know if I'll be getting that. I'm looking at the website and I'm like, maybe it'd be kind of cool. Like it's a system I've never experienced before. And, do I want an experience with the new system or maybe just buy an old system? I'll consider it. I honestly don't know if I need one more system to collect for at this time. Oh my God. It's just, I got a lot I'm collecting for. So, but yeah, nonetheless, that's the Commodore 64. We're still getting new stuff. It's awesome. Well, thanks for listening to this episode. Thanks, guys.